Have you ever felt like you don't belong anywhere in the world? What would you do if, after being rejected time and time again, you finally found someone who accepted you just as you are? Share in the comments if you've ever experienced a moment of rejection that deeply marked your life. Because today, I'm going to tell you a story that will touch your soul. It was 1995 in Beijing, China. Chen Wei had just turned 12 when his world shattered forever. His parents had died in a car accident, leaving him completely alone in a world that seemed to have no place for him. What Chen didn't know was that the years to come would be a nightmare of rejection that would leave a lasting scar on his heart. His aunt was the first to turn him away. "We can't take care of another child," she said as she packed his few belongings into a plastic bag. Chen still remembers the smell of incense in that house. Mixed with the salty tears, he couldn't stop crying while they argued about his future, as if he wasn't even there. Can you imagine being a child and hearing your own family reject you? How do you think that affects a young person's self-esteem? Share your thoughts with us, because what happened to Chen next was even more painful. His paternal uncles were next. For 3 months, Chen lived in the damp basement of their house, sleeping on a moldy-smelling mattress and eating scraps left on a chipped plate. "You're a burden," they told him over and over. "No one will ever love you." Those words pierced Chen's heart like knives, wounds that would last for decades. The third and final attempt was with his maternal grandparents. Chen had hoped they, who had loved his mother so deeply, would welcome him with open arms. But when he arrived at their small apartment on the outskirts of Beijing, the reality was devastating. "You remind us too much of her," his grandmother said with tears in her eyes. "It's too painful to have you here." At 13 years old, Chen Wei ended up in an overcrowded state orphanage where 200 children shared metal bunk beds and ate watery rice twice a day. The constant noise, the smell of cheap disinfectant, and the overwhelming sense of invisibility became his new reality. Every night, he stared at the water-stained ceiling, wondering what he had done to deserve so much rejection. Have you ever felt like the whole world was against you? How do you think a teenager could survive that much emotional pain? We want to hear your perspective, because Chen's story was about to take an unexpected turn. In 1998, when Chen was 15, a group of international volunteers arrived at the orphanage for a cultural exchange program. Among them was Margaret Thompson, a 58-year-old retired teacher from Portland, Oregon, who had decided to dedicate her retirement to helping children in need around the world. Margaret had gray hair tied up in a bun, green eyes full of kindness, and a smile that lit up any room she entered. When she saw Chen sitting alone in the corner of the dining hall, reading a torn English book he had found in the trash, something stirred deeply in her heart. "What are you reading, sweetheart?" Margaret asked in English as she sat down beside him on the worn wooden bench. Chen looked up, surprised that someone was speaking to him, especially a foreigner. His cheeks flushed as he stammered in basic English. I try learn English. Book is broken, but I like stories." Margaret's heart broke at the vulnerability in the eyes of this teenager, who had clearly endured more pain than any child should. Without hesitation, she took off her own jacket and gently placed it over Chen's shoulders. His shirt was far too small and full of holes. "Do you believe in life-changing encounters? Have you ever met someone who showed up just when you needed them the most? Let us know in the comments, because what happened between Margaret and Chen was nothing short of magical. During the 2 weeks Margaret stayed at the orphanage, she became the first person in years to treat Chen like he mattered. She brought him English books, taught him new words, and, most importantly, she listened. Chen told her about his parents, about being rejected by his family, and about his dreams of one day leaving China to study at an American university. Margaret saw something in Chen that no one else had, a brilliant mind hidden beneath years of hurt and rejection. "You're going to do amazing things in life, Chen," she told him as they walked through the orphanage courtyard. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You have a light inside you that the world needs to see." The night before Margaret left, Chen couldn't sleep. He had found in this American woman the mother figure he had lost, and the unconditional love his own family had denied him. With trembling hands, he wrote a letter in basic English that he had practiced for hours. Dear Margaret, you are the first person who make me feel I am worth something. I will never forget you. Thank you for seeing me. When Margaret read the letter, she cried harder than she had in years. She hugged Chen tightly, pouring into that embrace all the love a mother could feel, and promised him, "I'll never forget you either, Chen. Keep studying, keep dreaming, and remember, somewhere in the world someone believes in you completely." Has anyone ever believed in you when you didn't even believe in yourself? What does it mean to have someone who sees your potential when everyone else ignores you? Tell us, because the next part of the story is heartbreaking. Margaret had to return to the US, but the bond she had formed with Chen was too strong to vanish. However, communication in 1998 wasn't like it is today. Over time they lost contact. Chen didn't have internet access, and the letters he sent to the address Margaret gave him were never answered. Years passed, and Chen grew into a young man determined to change his fate. Using the confidence Margaret had planted in him, he earned a scholarship to Beijing University. He majored in social work, driven by the desire to help other children like him, those society had forgotten. By 25, Chen had emigrated to the United States with a work visa. He settled in San Francisco, working as a counselor for immigrants and refugees. But despite his professional success, there was a void in his heart that only Margaret could fill. Every day, he wondered where the woman who had given him hope might be. Have you ever tried to find someone who changed your life but you lost touch? Do you think it's worth searching for people who gave us something special in the past? We want to hear your thoughts, because Chen's search became a beautiful obsession. In 2010, Chen launched a systematic search for Margaret. He contacted volunteer organizations, searched through cultural exchange program archives, posted in Portland newspapers, and even hired a private investigator. His apartment filled with folders, photos, and documents related to the search. The search intensified with the rise of social media. Chen created Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram profiles, always posting the same blurry photo of himself and Margaret at the orphanage. Looking for Margaret Thompson, volunteer in Beijing Orphanage, 1998. He changed my life. Please share if you know her. For years, the posts were shared thousands of times, but with no results. Chen began to wonder if Margaret had passed away, or had simply chosen to leave that chapter of her life behind. But something in his heart told him not to give up. He owed her too much to just let go. How far would you go to thank someone who changed your life? Was Chen obsessed, or just deeply grateful? Share your thoughts, because after 15 years of searching, something incredible happened. In 2018, Chen made one last desperate attempt. He flew to Portland, Oregon, and began knocking on doors in neighborhoods where women Margaret's age might live. He visited churches, community centers, and volunteer groups. People looked at him with curiosity and compassion as he shared his story again and again. At a community center, an elderly woman recognized the description. Margaret Thompson, the one who worked at Lincoln Elementary before retiring. I think she moved to an assisted living home after her husband passed away. Let me make a few calls. Chen's heart pounded in his chest. After 20 years, he finally had a real lead. The woman gave him the address of Sunset Manor, a senior care home on the outskirts of Portland. When Chen arrived at Sunset Manor, his hands trembled as he walked down the hallways that smelled of disinfectant and medicine. A nurse led him to the backyard garden, where she said Margaret spent her afternoons reading under a large oak tree. Can you imagine that moment, after searching for someone for 20 years? How do you think Chen felt, standing so close to reuniting with a person who had changed his life? Tell us, because what happened next was pure magic. There she was, Margaret, now 78 years old, sitting in a wheelchair, her hair completely white but with the same kind green eyes Chen remembered. She was reading a book, and when she looked up and saw Chen walking toward her, the book slipped from her hands. "Chen," she whispered, her voice trembling as if she were seeing a ghost. "Is it really you?" Chen knelt beside her wheelchair, tears streaming down his cheeks. "It's me, Margaret. I've been searching for you for 20 years. I never forgot what you did for me. You saved me. Margaret began to cry, gently touching Chen's face as if to make sure he was real. "My dear boy, I thought I'd never see you again. I've thought about you all these years, wondering if you ever reached your dreams." Chen told her everything, about his education, his immigration to the US, his work helping others like him, and the family he now had. "Everything I am is because of you," he said. "You were the first person to make me feel like I mattered. You gave me hope when I had none. Do you believe in the transformative power of unconditional love? Have you seen how one person can completely change the course of another's life? We want to hear your thoughts on this extraordinary reunion." Margaret smiled through her tears. "Chen, you gave me just as much as I gave you. After meeting you, I found my purpose. I returned to China 5 more times to work with orphans. You showed me that a single moment of kindness can change a life forever." Chen spent a week in Portland, visiting Margaret every day. He showed her pictures of his wife and 2 daughters, and told her about the foundation he had created to support children rejected by their families. Margaret told him about all the children she had helped, inspired by him, and how his story had driven her to dedicate the rest of her life to service. On his final day, Chen gave Margaret a plaque that read, "To Margaret Thompson, the mother I chose and who chose me. Thank you for seeing light where others saw only darkness." Margaret gave Chen the book she had been reading when he arrived. It was the same book he had found torn in the orphanage trash more than 20 years ago. "I've carried it with me all these years," she said, "to remember the brave boy who taught me that love knows no borders. Who do you owe a thank you to that you've never been able to say? Who changed your life in such a way that your destiny was never the same?" Share with us in the comments because we all have someone like that. Today, Chen visits Margaret every month. His daughters call her Grandma Margaret, and she is officially part of their family. Together, they've created a program that connects Chinese orphans with adoptive families in the US, closing the circle of love that began in that orphanage more than 2 decades ago. This story teaches us that rejection doesn't define who we are, it's how we choose to respond to it. One person believing in us can change the entire course of our lives. Chen was rejected by 3 families, but found true love in a foreign woman who saw his worth when no one else did. We never know how our acts of kindness will shape someone's life. Margaret thought she was simply being kind to a sad boy, but in reality, she planted seeds of hope that grew for decades. In a world often filled with rejection and pain, stories like this remind us that love always finds a way to win.